The sweat on Catherine's neck mixed with dust and horse musk as she hauled another bale of hay across the stable floor, her muscles burning from the weight. She had spent the morning mucking out stalls at the Guthrie livery in Oklahoma Territory, where the summer heat of 1893 turned everything into a baking oven. And by noon, her dress clung to her back with perspiration that smelled decidedly of the animals she tended. She didn't mind it one bit. The horses were better company than most folks in town, and at 20 years old, she had grown accustomed to the whispers that followed her wherever she went. The banker's daughter had fallen far, they said, reduced to working in a stable after her father's business collapsed 3 years prior. Katherine wiped her forehead with the back of her hand and moved to the water trough where Daisy, the gray mare, waited patiently for her afternoon brushing. The rhythmic motion of the brush through the horse's coat had always calmed her, and she lost herself in the work, humming softly under her breath. She barely noticed when the stable door creaked open and heavy footsteps approached. "Madam, I need boarding for my horse." The voice was deep and rough, like gravel tumbling down a mountainside. Katherine turned and found herself looking up at the broadest chest she had ever seen. The man stood well over 6 feet tall, with shoulders that seemed to fill the entire doorway. His hair fell past his shoulders in dark waves, and his face bore the weathered look of someone who spent his life outdoors. Muscles strained against the fabric of his worn shirt, and his hands, large and calloused, held the reins of a massive black stallion. "We have room," Katherine said, trying to keep her voice steady. Something about this stranger made her heart beat faster. $3 a week includes feed and grooming." The man nodded and led his horse inside. As he passed her, Katherine caught the scent of pine and leather, and something wild that reminded her of the open territories beyond Guthrie's borders. She had never been one for fanciful thoughts, but this man seemed to carry the wilderness with him. "Name's Benjamin Pierce," he said, his gray eyes meeting hers directly. "Just passing through, but my horse needs rest. Been riding hard from Colorado. Katherine Dalton." She gestured to an empty stall. "You can put him there. What brings you to Guthrie?" Benjamin led the stallion into the stall with practiced ease, and Katherine noticed the way the animal responded to him, calm and trusting despite its obvious power. "Business," he said simply, then turned back to her. "You run this place?" "Might as well. Owner spends most of his time at the saloon these days. I handle the horses and the customers." She moved closer to inspect the stallion, running her hand along his flank. "Beautiful animal. You take good care of him. A man's horse is his lifeline out here." Benjamin studied her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "You know horses better than I know people most days." Katherine smiled despite herself. "This one's tired but healthy. I'll make sure he gets extra grain tonight." Benjamin nodded his approval. "Appreciate it, Miss Dalton." As he turned to leave, another voice cut through the stable's dim interior. Well, if it isn't Katherine the horse girl." Harold Mason swaggered in, his expensive suit at odds with the dusty surroundings. The banker's son had been trying to court Katherine for months, despite her repeated refusals. Still playing with horses instead of accepting a proper position. "My father could use someone to clean his office. More fitting for a lady." Katherine's jaw tightened. "I'm perfectly happy where I am, Harold. Did you need something, or are you just here to insult me again? Just trying to help you better yourself." Harold's eyes slid to Benjamin, sizing him up. "Who's this? Another drifter?" Benjamin's expression didn't change, but Katherine noticed his posture shift slightly, like a predator becoming alert to a threat. "Just a customer," he said quietly. "Course you are. Katherine attracts your type. She smells of horses, you know, not exactly appealing for a woman." Harold laughed at his own joke. No wonder she can't find a husband. Benjamin moved so quickly that Katherine barely saw him cross the space. He didn't touch Harold, but he positioned himself between the banker's son and Katherine, his presence alone enough to make Harold take several steps backward. "She smells of honest work and care," Benjamin said, his voice low and dangerous. "Something you wouldn't know anything about, judging by those soft hands." Harold's face flushed red. "You threatening me?" "Just making an observation." Benjamin held his ground. "Now, I believe the lady asked if you needed something." For a moment, Katherine thought Harold might try to stand up to the mountain man, but common sense won out. Harold straightened his jacket and glared at Katherine. "You're making a mistake, Katherine. When you're ready to stop being stubborn, you know where to find me." He stalked out of the stable, leaving an uncomfortable silence in his wake. Katherine let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. "You didn't have to do that." Didn't like his tone. Benjamin turned to face her, and his expression softened. "Man shouldn't talk to a woman that way, especially one who's just trying to make an honest living." Something warm spread through Katherine's chest. Most men in Guthrie treated her with a mixture of pity and disdain since her family's fall from grace. Benjamin was the first person in a long time to defend her without expecting anything in return. "Thank you," she said softly. "No thanks needed." He headed toward the door, then paused. "I'll be back this evening to check on my horse. Maybe I'll bring him some apples if you think he'd like them." "He'd like that." Katherine watched him leave, her mind spinning with questions about this stranger who had appeared out of nowhere and stood up for her without hesitation. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of routine tasks, but Katherine found her thoughts drifting back to Benjamin Pierce repeatedly. She told herself it was simply gratitude, nothing more. But when evening came and she heard his footsteps approaching the stable, her heart leaped in a way that had nothing to do with thankfulness. Benjamin carried a small bag of apples, as promised. "Bought these at the general store," he said, offering one to his stallion. The horse munched contentedly while Benjamin stroked his neck. "How's he doing?" "Good. Ate well and drank plenty." Katherine leaned against the stall door. "Where in Colorado did you come from?" "Mountains west of Denver. Been trapping and hunting up there for about 8 years." He fed another apple to the stallion. "Gets lonely, but I prefer it to crowded places." "What made you leave?" Katherine couldn't help her curiosity. Benjamin was quiet for a moment. "Sometimes a man needs to face things he's been avoiding. Had some family business to take care of." "My brother died last month, left me his share of our father's ranch. Need to decide what to do with it." "I'm sorry about your brother." Katherine's voice was gentle. "Hadn't seen him in years. We didn't part on good terms." Benjamin's jaw tightened. "He stayed to help run the ranch while I took off for the mountains. Always thought there'd be time to make things right." Katherine understood the weight of regret. She carried her own burden of words left unsaid to her father before he died. "I lost my father 2 years ago. I know how it feels to have things left unfinished." Their eyes met, and something passed between them, an understanding born of shared loss. Benjamin moved closer to the stall door, close enough that Katherine could feel the warmth radiating from him. "What happened to your family?" "If you don't mind me asking." Katherine hesitated, then found herself telling him the story she rarely shared. "My father was a banker. He made some bad investments, trusted the wrong people. When everything collapsed, it broke him. He died of a heart attack 6 months later. My mother couldn't handle the shame. She moved back east to live with her sister. I stayed because this is my home, even if everyone here treats me differently now." "Their loss," Benjamin said simply. "Anyone with eyes can see you're stronger than the whole lot of them." Katherine felt tears prick her eyes, unexpected and unwelcome. She blinked them back quickly. You don't even know me. Know enough. You work hard, you're good with animals, and you don't let fools like that Harold fellow push you around. That's more than most people can say. Benjamin reached through the stall bars and touched her hand lightly. The contact sent electricity through her arm. You're doing just fine, Katherine Dalton. They stood there in the growing darkness, the stable quiet except for the soft sounds of horses shifting in their stalls. Katherine knew she should pull her hand away, maintain proper distance with this stranger, but she couldn't bring herself to break the connection. It had been so long since anyone had offered her genuine kindness without judgment or expectation. "How long will you be in Guthrie?" she asked finally. "Was planning on leaving tomorrow, but I might stay a few days. No rush to get where I'm going." His thumb traced a small circle on the back of her hand. "Unless you want me gone." "No." The word came out more forcefully than she intended. "I mean, you're welcome to stay as long as you need." A smile tugged at the corner of Benjamin's mouth, the first real expression of pleasure she had seen on his rugged face. "Then I'll stay. Maybe you could show me around Guthrie. Been traveling so long, I've forgotten what it's like to spend time in a town." "There's not much to see, but I'd be happy to." Katherine reluctantly pulled her hand back. "I should finish up here. The owner will be by later to collect the day's earnings, drunk as usual." "What's his name?" Benjamin asked. "Robert Franklin. He inherited the stable from his father. Doesn't care much about the business, just the money it brings in." Katherine picked up a pitchfork and moved to the next stall, "But it's work and I'm grateful for it." Benjamin watched her for a moment longer. "I'll let you finish. See you tomorrow, Katherine." After he left, Katherine stood alone in the stable, her hand still tingling where he had touched it. She told herself not to be foolish. Benjamin Pierce was just passing through. He would leave Guthrie and she would never see him again. But that night, as she climbed the stairs to her small room above the stable, she couldn't stop thinking about his gray eyes and the way he had defended her without hesitation. The next morning dawned hot and clear. Katherine rose early as always, tending to the horses before the worst heat of the day set in. She was brushing down a chestnut gelding when Benjamin arrived, carrying 2 plates wrapped in cloth. "Thought you might like breakfast," he said, offering her one of the plates. "Got biscuits and eggs from the boarding house." Katherine's stomach growled in response. She had skipped dinner the night before, too caught up in her thoughts to eat. "Thank you. You didn't have to do that." "Wanted to." Benjamin leaned against a support beam, watching her eat. "Figured if you're going to show me around town, you'll need your strength." They ate together in comfortable silence, and Katherine marveled at how easy it felt to be around him. With most people, she felt the need to guard her words and actions, always aware of how she might be judged. But Benjamin didn't seem to judge at all. He simply accepted her as she was. After breakfast, Katherine showed him the small town of Guthrie. The Oklahoma Territory capital was still young, having only been established a few years earlier during the land run of 1889. The streets bustled with activity, a mix of hopeful settlers, businessmen, cowboys, and the occasional outlaw passing through. Katherine pointed out the various establishments: the general store, the church, the newspaper office, the saloons that lined the main street. "It grew fast," she explained as they walked. "One day it was empty prairie. The next there were thousands of people racing to claim land. My father thought it would be a good opportunity for his banking business. He was right at first." Benjamin listened intently, his eyes taking in everything around them. Several people stared as they passed, curiosity evident on their faces. Katherine Dalton walking with a strange mountain man was clearly the talk of the morning. She tried to ignore the whispers. "You like it here?" Benjamin asked. Katherine considered the question. "It's home. I don't have anywhere else to go, and despite everything, there's something about this place that feels right. It's young and rough around the edges, but it's full of possibility. Or at least it was before everyone decided I wasn't worth their time. Their loss. Benjamin repeated his words from the day before. They stopped at the edge of town, looking out over the rolling prairie that stretched endlessly in every direction. The grass moved in waves under the wind, and Katherine felt the familiar pull of the open spaces. She had always loved the wild country surrounding Guthrie, even though she rarely ventured far from town. "What's it like up in the Colorado mountains?" she asked. Benjamin's expression became distant, thoughtful. "Quiet. Beautiful in a harsh way. The peaks touch the clouds, and in winter the snow gets so deep you can barely move. But there's a peace up there, away from people and their complications. Just you and the land and whatever you can make of it." "Sounds lonely," Katherine said softly. "It is." He turned to look at her. "Didn't realize how much until I came down and met you." Katherine's breath caught. The intensity in his gaze made her feel exposed and understood all at once. "Benjamin, you barely know me." "You shouldn't say things like that." "Why not? It's true." He moved closer and Katherine's heart raced. "I know it's fast. Hell, I know it's probably crazy. But I spent 8 years alone in those mountains, and in 2 days you've made me feel more alive than I have in all that time." "That's got to mean something." "What are you saying?" Katherine whispered. "I'm saying I don't want to leave Guthrie just yet. I'm saying I want to get to know you better. And I'm saying that maybe, if you feel even a fraction of what I'm feeling, we could see where this goes." Benjamin reached out and gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "But if I'm reading this wrong, tell me now and I'll back off. Last thing I want is to make you uncomfortable." Katherine's mind whirled. Every practical part of her brain screamed that this was foolish, that she couldn't possibly trust a stranger who had appeared in her life just yesterday. But her heart, the part she had locked away after too many disappointments, yearned to say yes. She wanted this connection, this feeling of being seen and valued. She wanted Benjamin Pierce. "You're not reading it wrong," she said, her voice barely audible. "I feel it too." The smile that spread across Benjamin's face transformed him. The hard edges softened, and Katherine saw the man beneath the weathered exterior, someone who had been hurt and lonely but still had the capacity for hope. He took her hand, threading his fingers through hers. "Then let's take this one day at a time. No pressure, no expectations. Just us getting to know each other." They walked back toward town hand in hand, and Katherine felt the eyes of Guthrie's citizens on them, but for once she didn't care what they thought. Let them whisper and speculate. She had spent 3 years trying to rebuild her life according to what others expected of her, trying to be small and unobtrusive to avoid judgment. Benjamin made her feel like she could stand tall again. Over the next few days, they fell into a rhythm. Benjamin would help her with the morning chores at the stable, his strength making quick work of the heavy tasks that usually left her exhausted. They would share breakfast, then spend the afternoons exploring the countryside around Guthrie. Benjamin taught her to track animals and identify plants, skills he had honed during his years in the mountains. Katherine showed him her favorite spots along the nearby river, where she sometimes went to escape the town's scrutiny. They talked about everything and nothing. Benjamin told her about his childhood on his father's ranch, the complicated relationship with his family that had driven him to the mountains. Katherine shared her dreams of one day having her own small farm, a place where she could raise horses properly instead of just caring for other people's animals. They discovered a shared love of early morning sunrises and a mutual dislike of crowded social gatherings. On the 4th day, they were sitting by the river when Benjamin pulled her close and kissed her for the first time. His lips were gentle despite his rough appearance, and Katherine melted into him, feeling safe and desired in a way she had never experienced before. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, Benjamin rested his forehead against hers. "I'm falling for you, Katherine," he said. "I know it's fast, but I can't help it." "I'm falling for you too," she admitted. "It terrifies me. We'll figure it out together." He kissed her again, and Katherine believed him. But happiness in Guthrie never lasted long without complication. That evening, when Katherine returned to the stable alone, Harold Mason was waiting for her. His face was flushed with anger, and she could smell whiskey on his breath. "So it's true," he said, blocking her path. "You're spreading your legs for some mountain trash while rejecting decent men like me." Katherine's temper flared. "Get out of my way, Harold. I don't owe you anything. Your father would be ashamed." Harold grabbed her arm roughly. "I offered you a respectable position, a way to restore your family's name, but you'd rather play whore to a drifter. Let go of me." Katherine tried to pull free, but Harold's grip tightened. "Not until you listen. That man is going to use you and leave you with nothing. At least with me, you'd have security, a future. Why can't you see that?" Suddenly Harold was jerked backward as Benjamin appeared from the shadows. He held Harold by the collar, lifting him almost off his feet. "She told you to let go," Benjamin said, his voice deadly calm. "You don't listen well, do you?" Harold struggled uselessly against Benjamin's iron grip. "This is none of your business. Katherine is my business." Benjamin's eyes were cold. "You're going to leave now, and you're not going to come near her again. Understand? You can't threaten me. My father practically runs this town." But Harold's voice wavered with fear. "Don't care who your father is." Benjamin set him down but kept a firm hand on his shoulder. "You put your hands on her again, and I promise you'll regret it, rich daddy or not." Harold looked at Katherine, perhaps hoping she would intervene, but she crossed her arms and glared at him. He wrenched himself free from Benjamin's grasp and stumbled toward the door. "You'll both regret this. My father won't stand for this kind of treatment." He disappeared into the night, leaving behind only his threats. Katherine sagged against a stall door, adrenaline making her shake. Benjamin immediately moved to her side, his rough demeanor evaporating as he checked her arm where Harold had grabbed her. "Did he hurt you?" "No, I'm fine." "He's all talk mostly." But Katherine's voice trembled. "Benjamin, he's right about one thing. His father does have influence in this town. He could make things difficult for us. Let him try." Benjamin cupped her face in his large hands. "I'm not letting anyone hurt you or threaten you. I don't care who they are." Katherine leaned into his touch, feeling the last of her reservations crumble away. This man, this stranger who had walked into her life less than a week ago, was willing to stand between her and the whole town if necessary. She had been alone for so long, carrying the weight of her family's disgrace by herself. Having someone in her corner felt like a miracle. "What are we going to do?" she asked. Benjamin was quiet for a long moment. "I've been thinking about that. The business I came here to take care of, my brother's share of the ranch, I need to go back to Colorado and settle it, but I don't want to leave you here." Katherine's heart sank. "When do you have to go?" "Soon. But Katherine, come with me." The words tumbled out in a rush. "I know it's crazy. We've only known each other a few days. But I can't stand the thought of leaving you behind. Come to Colorado with me. We'll sort out the ranch situation together, and then we can decide what comes next." "Benjamin, I can't just leave. I have a job here, responsibilities." But even as she said it, Katherine felt the pull of his offer. What did she really have in Guthrie? A job working for a drunk who barely paid her, a room above a stable, and a town full of people who had written her off years ago. "Think about it," Benjamin urged. "You told me you wanted your own place to raise horses. My father's ranch has good land, plenty of space. We could build something there together. I'm not promising it will be easy, but I'm promising I'll work every day to make you happy." Katherine looked into his eyes and saw the sincerity there. This wasn't some practiced seduction or empty promise. Benjamin was laying his heart bare, offering her a future she had stopped believing was possible. "Yes," she said, surprising herself. "Yes, I'll come with you." Benjamin's face lit up, and he swept her into his arms, spinning her around in the stable while horses whickered in surprise. When he set her down, he kissed her deeply, pouring every ounce of his feeling into it. Katherine kissed him back with equal passion, tasting their future in that moment. They made plans quickly. Katherine gave notice to Robert Franklin, who was too drunk to care much about losing his stable hand. She packed her few belongings into a single trunk, amazed at how little she had accumulated in 20 years of life. Most of what she owned were practical items and work clothes. She did have one nice dress, a blue calico that had survived from her family's better days, and she packed it carefully. The day before they were set to leave, Katherine went to say goodbye to the few people in town who had remained kind to her. Mrs. Patterson at the general store hugged her tightly. "You deserve happiness, dear. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. That mountain man of yours looks at you like you hung the moon." "Thank you for always being kind to me," Katherine said, emotion thick in her throat. "You were always a good girl, Katherine. Your father's mistakes weren't yours to carry." Mrs. Patterson pressed a small package into her hands. "Some provisions for your journey, and this." She handed Katherine a worn Bible. "It was your mother's. She left it with me when she went east, said she couldn't bear to take it. I've been holding on to it, hoping she'd come back for it. But I think you should have it now." Katherine clutched the Bible, tears streaming down her face. "I don't know what to say. Say you'll write and let me know how you're doing, and say you'll be happy." Mrs. Patterson smiled through her own tears. As Katherine walked back to the stable, she ran into Harold Mason one last time. He stood in the middle of the street, his face a mask of barely controlled rage. "Running away with your mountain man," he called out. "Proving everyone right about what kind of woman you are." Katherine stopped and turned to face him. For 3 years, she had endured the whispers and judgment of people like Harold, had tried to make herself small and acceptable to win back their approval. She was done with that. "The only thing I'm proving is that I know my own worth," she said clearly, "something you never recognized. I hope you find someone who can tolerate your bitterness, Harold, but it was never going to be me." She walked away without looking back, leaving Harold sputtering in the street. When she reached the stable, Benjamin was waiting with the horses saddled and ready. He had purchased a gentle mare for Katherine, a pretty bay with a white star on her forehead. "Thought you'd want your own horse," he said. "Her name's Lily." Katherine ran her hand along Lily's neck, marveling at the thoughtfulness of the gesture. "She's perfect." They rode out of Guthrie at dawn the next morning, the rising sun painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Katherine looked back once at the town that had been her home, feeling a mixture of sadness and relief. She was leaving behind everything familiar, riding off with a man she had known for barely a week. It was reckless and impulsive and probably foolish. It was also the most right thing she had ever done. The journey to Colorado took 2 weeks. They traveled northwest through the Oklahoma Territory, crossing into Kansas, and then into Colorado. The landscape changed gradually from rolling prairies to rugged hills, and eventually to the imposing peaks of the Rocky Mountains. Benjamin proved to be an excellent traveling companion, always ensuring they had safe places to camp and enough food and water. At night, they would sit by the fire and talk, or simply enjoy the comfortable silence between them. On the 5th night, camped beside a stream in Kansas, Benjamin pulled Katherine into his bedroll and made love to her under the stars. It was her first time, and he was gentle and patient, bringing her to heights of pleasure she hadn't known existed. Afterward, as they lay tangled together, Benjamin whispered, "I love you, Katherine Dalton. I know I'm supposed to wait longer to say it, but I don't see the point in hiding what I feel." "I love you too," Katherine said, the words feeling both terrifying and liberating. "I think I started falling the moment you defended me in the stable." They made love again, slower this time, learning each other's bodies with thorough attention. Katherine had never felt so cherished, so completely seen and accepted. In Benjamin's arms, she wasn't the disgraced banker's daughter or the stable girl who smelled of horses. She was simply Katherine, worthy of love and desire. The next morning brought rain, and they rode through it soaked to the skin but laughing like children. Benjamin taught her trail songs, and she taught him the hymns she remembered from church. They stopped at small towns along the way to resupply, and Katherine noticed how people reacted to Benjamin, a mixture of respect and wariness. He carried himself with the confidence of a man who had survived alone in the wilderness, and others instinctively gave him space. As they crossed into Colorado, Benjamin grew quieter. Katherine could sense the tension building in him as they drew closer to his family's ranch. On their 13th day of travel, they crested a hill and Benjamin pointed down into a valley. "There," he said, "the Pierce Ranch." Katherine looked down at the sprawling property below. Even from a distance, she could see that it was well maintained, with sturdy buildings and fenced pastures dotted with cattle. Mountains rose dramatically to the west, their peaks still capped with snow despite the summer heat. It was breathtakingly beautiful. "It's bigger than I expected," she said. "My father spent his whole life building it, started with nothing but a land claim and determination." Benjamin's voice was heavy with complicated emotions. "Come on, time to face the music." They rode down into the valley, and as they approached the main ranch house, several people emerged to watch their arrival. A woman in her 50s stood on the porch, her face weathered but kind. When she saw Benjamin, her hand flew to her mouth. Benjamin, is that really you?" She rushed down the steps and threw her arms around him as he dismounted. "Oh, my boy, you came home." "Hello, Ma." Benjamin hugged her tightly. "I'm sorry it took so long. You're here now, that's what matters." His mother pulled back to look at him, tears streaming down her face. Then her eyes found Katherine, still mounted on Lily. "And who is this?" Benjamin helped Katherine down from her horse and kept a protective arm around her waist. "Ma, this is Katherine Dalton. Katherine, my mother, Martha Pierce." Martha's eyes widened slightly, taking in Katherine's travel-worn appearance and the obvious intimacy between her and Benjamin. But her smile didn't waver. "Welcome to the Pierce Ranch, Katherine. Any friend of Benjamin's is welcome here." "Thank you, Mrs. Pierce." Katherine wasn't sure what else to say. The situation felt overwhelming, meeting Benjamin's family after such a short time together. A man stepped forward from the group of ranch hands, older than Benjamin but with similar features. "Brother," he said, his voice neutral. Benjamin stiffened. "Caleb." "I thought you were dead." Caleb's expression didn't change. "That was Thomas, our youngest brother. He died last month from pneumonia. I sent the telegram." The confusion on Benjamin's face was painful to see, but the telegram said my brother had died and left me his share of the ranch. "I thought it was you. Thomas was only 15 when I left. 23 when he died." Caleb's voice held an edge of accusation. "You missed a lot of years, Ben. Thomas grew up, fell in love, got married. He and Sarah had just started building their own house on the east section when he got sick. He wanted you to have his share because he always looked up to you, even though you abandoned us." The words hit Benjamin like physical blows. Katherine felt him sway slightly and tightened her grip on him. "Benjamin didn't know," she said firmly. "He thought he was coming to settle your affairs, not your youngest brother's. Don't blame him for that." Caleb's eyes shifted to her, assessing. "And you are?" "Someone who loves him," Katherine said without hesitation. Martha stepped between her sons before the tension could escalate further. "That's enough for now. Benjamin just got here, and he and his young lady must be exhausted from traveling. Let's get you both cleaned up and fed, and we can sort everything else out later." She ushered them into the ranch house, a large log structure with comfortable furnishings and windows that looked out over the valley. Katherine was shown to a guest room with a real bed and a wash basin, luxuries after 2 weeks on the trail. Martha brought her fresh water and a clean towel. "I'll have some of my dresses brought up for you, dear. We're about the same size, I think. Mrs. Pierce, I don't want to impose." Katherine felt uncomfortable accepting so much hospitality when the family was clearly dealing with grief and complicated dynamics. "Nonsense. You're with Benjamin, which makes you family as far as I'm concerned." Martha sat on the edge of the bed and patted Katherine's hand. "I can see you care for him. That's enough for me. Lord knows that boy needs someone in his corner." "He told me he and his family weren't on good terms when he left," Katherine said carefully. Martha sighed. "Benjamin and his father butted heads constantly. Ben wanted to explore, to see the world beyond the ranch. His father wanted him to settle down and help run the place. They both said things they shouldn't have, and Ben took off for the mountains. That was 8 years ago. He never came back, not even when his father died 5 years ago." Katherine's heart ached for Benjamin. She understood family complications, the way pride and hurt feelings could build walls between people who loved each other. He mentioned regret about his brother. He thought he'd have time to make things right. "We always think we have more time." Martha's eyes were sad. "Thomas worshipped Benjamin. Used to talk about him all the time, wondering when his big brother would come home. He made Caleb promise to contact Ben if anything ever happened to him. Thomas left his share of the ranch to Benjamin because he hoped it would bring him back." "It did," Katherine said softly, "though not the way anyone expected." After bathing and changing into one of Martha's dresses, Katherine felt almost human again. She found Benjamin standing on the back porch, looking out at the mountains. She slipped her arms around his waist from behind, resting her cheek against his broad back. "I thought I was coming to settle Caleb's affairs," Benjamin said, his voice rough with emotion. "I told myself I was doing my duty as a brother, being the bigger man by showing up. But the truth is, I was relieved. Thought it meant I wouldn't have to face everyone, deal with all the disappointment and anger. And now I find out Thomas died. The baby brother I left behind, the one who was just a kid the last time I saw him. He grew up without me, and I'll never get to know the man he became." Katherine held him tighter. "You couldn't have known. I should have come back sooner, should have swallowed my pride and made amends years ago." Benjamin turned in her arms, and Katherine saw tears tracking down his weathered face. "I wasted so much time being angry and stubborn, and for what? Hey, look at me." Katherine cupped his face, forcing him to meet her eyes. "You're here now. You can't change the past, but you can decide what happens next. Thomas wanted you to have his share of this ranch for a reason. Maybe it's time to stop running and build something here." "Is that what you want?" Benjamin asked. "To stay here? This wasn't what I promised you." "I said we'd figure things out together." Katherine thought about Guthrie, the stable where she had spent 3 years just surviving. Then she looked around at the beautiful valley, the well-maintained ranch, the family that despite their conflicts clearly cared about each other. "I think this could be home," she said. "If you want it to be." Benjamin pulled her close and kissed her forehead. "I don't deserve you. Lucky for you, I disagree." Katherine smiled up at him. "Come on, let's go have dinner with your family. It's time to start healing." Dinner that evening was awkward but not hostile. Martha had prepared a feast, clearly happy to have her son home. Caleb was reserved but not openly antagonistic. He had his father's pragmatic nature and had been running the ranch efficiently since their father's death. Sarah, Thomas's widow, joined them, a young woman with red-rimmed eyes and a brave smile. She was only 19 and already facing life as a widow. "Thomas talked about you all the time," Sarah told Benjamin. "He had all these stories about the two of you as boys, getting into trouble and exploring the hills. He always said that one day you'd come back and he'd introduce you to me properly." Benjamin's hands clenched on his fork. "I'm so sorry, Sarah. Sorry I wasn't here. Sorry I missed knowing him as a man. Sorry for your loss. He wouldn't want you to feel guilty." Sarah's voice was gentle. "Thomas understood why you left. He used to say that some people are meant for bigger spaces, and you were one of them. He was proud that his brother was brave enough to follow his own path, even if it meant being alone." The conversation moved to ranch business. Caleb explained the current state of affairs, herd numbers, plans for expansion, challenges with water rights from neighboring properties. Benjamin listened intently, asking intelligent questions that showed he hadn't completely forgotten his ranching roots. Katherine watched the brothers interact, seeing the family resemblance not just in their features, but in the way they approached problems systematically. After dinner, Martha pulled Katherine aside while the men discussed specifics about Thomas's share of the property. "I wanted to talk to you about something, dear. I hope I'm not overstepping." "Of course not," Katherine said. "Ben's been alone for a long time. He doesn't trust easily, and he's built walls around himself to keep from being hurt." Martha's expression was knowing. "But he looks at you like you're the sun and moon combined. I've never seen him like this with anyone. Are your intentions toward my son honorable?" Katherine couldn't help but smile at the reversal of the usual question. "Very honorable, Mrs. Pierce. I love him. I know it's fast, and I know people will think I'm crazy for leaving everything I knew to follow him here, but I've never been more certain of anything in my life." Martha's face softened. "That's what I thought, but I had to ask. Benjamin's been hurt enough." She paused, then continued carefully. "He needs to know that when things get hard, you won't leave. This ranch, this life, it's not easy. The winters are brutal, the work is endless, and being a rancher's wife means sacrifice. Can you handle that?" "I spent 3 years mucking out stables and being looked down on by everyone in my town," Katherine said firmly. "I know about hard work and sacrifice, and I know about being alone. I'm not afraid of difficult things, Mrs. Pierce. I'm only afraid of losing Benjamin." Martha pulled her into a warm embrace. "Then welcome to the family, Katherine, truly." Over the next several weeks, Katherine and Benjamin settled into life on the ranch. They stayed in the main house initially, but Benjamin immediately began making plans to build them their own cabin on Thomas's portion of the land. Katherine threw herself into ranch life, discovering that her skills with horses translated well to the larger-scale operation. She helped break new horses, tended to sick animals, and quickly became indispensable. The ranch hands, initially skeptical of the mountain man city girl, came to respect her work ethic and knowledge. She didn't complain about the long hours or difficult conditions, and she could hold her own with the roughest horses. Soon, they were coming to her for advice and treating her as one of their own. Benjamin worked alongside his brother to learn the ins and outs of modern ranching. 8 years away had left him rusty on some things, but his time in the mountains had taught him valuable skills about surviving and thriving in harsh conditions. He and Caleb slowly rebuilt their relationship through shared labor and honest conversations about the past. One evening, about a month after their arrival, Benjamin took Katherine to see the site where he wanted to build their cabin. It was a beautiful spot on a hillside, with views of the valley and the mountains beyond. A stream ran nearby, providing fresh water year-round. "What do you think?" he asked, standing behind her with his arms wrapped around her waist. "It's perfect," Katherine said honestly. "I can see our home here, maybe a barn over there for the horses and a garden on that flat area." "A garden, huh? I didn't know you were interested in gardening." Benjamin nuzzled her neck. "There's a lot you don't know about me yet. We've only known each other 2 months." Katherine turned in his arms to face him. "But we have a lifetime to figure everything out." Benjamin dropped to one knee right there in the tall grass, and Katherine's breath caught. He pulled a simple gold band from his pocket. "This was my grandmother's ring. Ma gave it to me last week. Katherine Dalton, you walked into my life when I needed you most, and you've changed everything. You make me want to be better, to build something lasting instead of running away. Will you marry me? Will you be my wife and build this life with me?" Katherine was crying too hard to speak at first, but she nodded vigorously. When she finally found her voice, she said, "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes." Benjamin slipped the ring onto her finger and stood, picking her up and spinning her around just like he had in the stable in Guthrie. When he set her down, he kissed her deeply, and Katherine felt like her heart might burst from happiness. This man, this strong, complicated, wonderful man, was going to be her husband. They were married a month later in a simple ceremony at the small church in the nearest town. Martha cried throughout the entire service. Caleb stood as Benjamin's best man. Their relationship healed enough for genuine brotherhood to shine through. Sarah was Katherine's maid of honor, and the two young women had become close friends through their shared experiences of loss and new beginnings. Katherine wore her blue calico dress from Guthrie, and Benjamin cleaned up remarkably well in a borrowed suit. But what Katherine remembered most from the ceremony was the way Benjamin looked at her when she walked down the aisle, like she was the answer to every prayer he had never dared to speak aloud. The ranch community threw them a celebration afterward, with food and dancing and genuine warmth. Katherine was welcomed wholeheartedly into the fold, no longer an outsider but Benjamin Pierce's wife, a valued member of the Pierce family. It was so different from Guthrie, where every interaction had been tinged with judgment and pity. Here, she was simply Katherine, and that was enough. Their wedding night was spent in the main house, but Benjamin carried her over the threshold as practice for when their cabin was finished. He made love to her slowly and thoroughly, worshiping every inch of her body and whispering words of love and devotion. Katherine had never felt so beautiful, so desired, so completely home. Work on the cabin progressed quickly with help from the ranch hands. By late autumn, it was finished. A snug 2-room structure with a stone fireplace, glass windows, and a covered porch. Katherine spent happy days making it into a home, sewing curtains and arranging their meager furniture. Martha contributed linens and cooking pots, and Sarah gave them a beautiful quilt she had made. The day they officially moved in, Benjamin carried Katherine over the threshold for real this time. They stood in the middle of their new home, holding each other and marveling at what they had built in such a short time. Just 6 months ago, Katherine had been alone in a stable in Guthrie, and Benjamin had been isolated in the Colorado mountains. Now they had each other, a home, a family, and a future full of possibility. "Happy?" Benjamin asked, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear in the gesture that had become familiar. "More than I ever thought possible," Katherine said honestly. "I love you, Benjamin Pierce." "I love you too, Katherine Pierce." He tested her new name on his tongue and grinned. Sounds right. Winter came to the valley with a vengeance, bringing snow that piled high against the cabin walls and temperatures that made Benjamin's stories of mountain winters seem less exaggerated. But inside their little home, Katherine and Benjamin were warm and content. They spent long evenings by the fire, talking and making plans for the spring. Benjamin taught her to read sign language so they could communicate silently when necessary, and Katherine taught him proper grammar to improve his letter writing. They made love frequently, unable to keep their hands off each other. Katherine blossomed under Benjamin's attention, becoming more confident and assured in her own skin. The shy, guarded stable girl from Guthrie had been replaced by a woman who knew her own worth and wasn't afraid to claim her happiness. In February, Katherine realized she was pregnant. She told Benjamin one snowy evening, nervous about how he would react, but his face lit up with such pure joy that her worries evaporated. He pulled her into his arms and held her gently, as if she were made of spun glass. "We're going to have a baby," he said wonderingly. "Katherine, we're going to be parents. Are you happy?" she asked, needing to hear him say it. Happy doesn't begin to cover it. Benjamin cupped her face and kissed her tenderly. "You've given me everything, Katherine. A home, a family, a reason to be better, and now a child. I don't have words for what I'm feeling." Martha was overjoyed at the news of a grandchild coming. She immediately began knitting tiny clothes and offering Katherine advice about pregnancy and childbirth. Sarah, who had announced her own pregnancy just weeks before, bonded with Katherine over their shared condition. The two women spent hours together, sewing baby clothes and talking about their hopes and fears. Spring came eventually, melting the snow and revealing the greening valley. Katherine's belly grew round, and Benjamin became almost comically protective. He worried constantly about her doing too much work, insisted she rest more than she wanted, and checked on her dozens of times a day. Katherine found his hovering both endearing and occasionally irritating, but she knew it came from love. In early September, after a long labor that terrified Benjamin and left Katherine exhausted, their son was born. He came into the world squalling and healthy, with his father's dark hair and his mother's determined expression. They named him Thomas, after Benjamin's brother, and when Benjamin held his son for the first time, tears streamed down his rugged face. "He's perfect," Benjamin whispered. "Katherine, he's absolutely perfect." Martha declared Thomas the most beautiful baby she had ever seen, which made Caleb roll his eyes since she said the same thing about Sarah's daughter Mary when she was born a month later. But no one could deny that the Pierce family was growing and thriving. Katherine took to motherhood with the same determination she brought to everything else. She nursed Thomas, changed his diapers, and walked the floor with him during fussy nights. Benjamin was a devoted father, spending every spare moment with his son. The sight of this massive, muscular mountain man cradling a tiny infant with infinite gentleness never failed to make Katherine's heart swell. As Thomas grew from infant to toddler, Benjamin and Katherine's relationship only deepened. They weathered the challenges of new parenthood together, supporting each other through sleepless nights and the constant demands of ranch life. Their love had been quick to ignite, but it had proven strong enough to last. The ranch prospered under the combined efforts of the Pierce brothers. Caleb's practical management and Benjamin's innovative ideas created a successful partnership. They expanded the herd, improved the breeding stock, and negotiated better prices for their cattle. The Pierce Ranch became one of the most respected operations in the region. Katherine established a reputation as an excellent horse trainer. Ranchers from neighboring properties brought their difficult horses to her, and she worked with each one patiently until they responded. She charged fair prices and plowed the money back into improving their own horse breeding program. Benjamin built her a proper stable and training ring, and she spent happy hours working with the animals she loved. 2 years after Thomas's birth, Katherine gave birth to twin girls. Elizabeth and Emma arrived on a warm spring day, identical in every way except their temperaments. Elizabeth was quiet and thoughtful, while Emma was loud and adventurous from the start. Benjamin was beside himself with joy at having daughters, and he proved to be just as protective of them as he was of Katherine. The cabin became too small for their growing family, so they expanded it, adding 2 more rooms and a larger kitchen. Katherine's garden flourished, providing vegetables for their table and medicinal herbs for treating minor ailments. Life fell into a comfortable rhythm of work and family, seasons passing in a blur of cattle drives, harvests, holidays, and small daily joys. Sarah eventually remarried, a good man who had been widowed himself and understood loss. She and Katherine remained close friends, and their children grew up together like siblings. The Pierce Ranch became a place of laughter and life, a far cry from the lonely existence Benjamin had led in the mountains or Katherine's isolation in Guthrie. One evening, about 5 years after they had first met, Katherine and Benjamin sat on their porch watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and purple. The children were asleep inside, finally quiet after a rowdy dinner. Benjamin held Katherine's hand, his thumb tracing the same small circles he had drawn that first night in the Guthrie stable. "You ever regret it?" he asked quietly. "Leaving Guthrie with a stranger, building a life out here." Katherine thought about the question seriously. She thought about the young woman she had been, broken and hopeless, working in a stable because she had no other options. She thought about the whispers and judgment, the loneliness that had consumed her. Then she looked at the home they had built, the family they had created, the love that surrounded them. "Not for a single second," she said firmly. "You saved me, Benjamin. I know you think I saved you, but it was mutual. We saved each other." "I used to think I needed the mountains to feel free," Benjamin said. "Turns out I just needed you. And this." He gestured at the valley spread before them. "Family, home, purpose. Things I thought I didn't want because I was too scared to admit how badly I wanted them." "We were both running from different things," Katherine said. "But we found each other at exactly the right time. Or maybe we found the courage to stop running." Benjamin pulled her close, and Katherine rested her head on his shoulder. They sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky. Somewhere in the distance, cattle lowed softly. Closer, the horses in the stable moved in their stalls. Inside the cabin, one of the twins whimpered in her sleep, then settled. "I love you," Benjamin said. "Every day I love you more than the day before. That's a feeling I never want to lose." "You won't," Katherine promised. "I'm not going anywhere. You're stuck with me forever. Best news I've heard all day." Benjamin kissed the top of her head. They stayed on the porch until the night grew cold, then went inside to check on their sleeping children. Thomas was sprawled across his bed, one arm hanging off the side. The twins were curled together in their crib, as inseparable in sleep as they were awake. Benjamin adjusted Thomas's blanket while Katherine covered the girls more securely. In their own room, they undressed for bed and slipped under the quilts. Benjamin pulled Katherine against him, her back to his chest, and wrapped his arm around her waist. This was how they slept every night, tangled together even in unconsciousness, as if their bodies knew they were safer together. "Thank you," Benjamin whispered in the darkness. "For what?" Katherine asked sleepily. "For taking a chance on me. For saying yes when I asked you to come to Colorado. For loving me when I didn't think I deserved it. For giving me this life." His voice was thick with emotion. "For everything." Katherine turned in his arms so she could see his face in the moonlight streaming through the window. You gave me everything too. A home, a family, respect, love. You defended me when no one else would. You saw me, really saw me when everyone else looked right through me. I would say yes 1,000 times over if I had to make the choice again. They made love then, slowly and sweetly, reaffirming their bond in the most primal way. Afterward, Katherine drifted off to sleep in Benjamin's arms, feeling utterly safe and loved. She dreamed of horses running across open prairie and mountains touching the sky, and a dark-haired man with gray eyes who had walked into a stable and changed her life forever. The years continued to pass. The children grew and thrived. Thomas became a serious boy who loved working with his father and uncle on the ranch. Elizabeth showed Katherine's gift with horses, while Emma proved to be a natural leader who organized the other ranch children into elaborate games. 2 more children joined the family, another son named James and a daughter named Ruth. The cabin had to be expanded again to accommodate everyone. Katherine's horse training business flourished to the point where she had a waiting list of clients. Benjamin and Caleb's partnership made the Pierce Ranch one of the most successful in Colorado. Martha lived to see all her grandchildren grow, passing away peacefully in her sleep at 72, content in the knowledge that her family was whole and happy. Sarah's second marriage produced 3 more children, and the combined Pierce families became a small dynasty in the valley. They built a schoolhouse so the children wouldn't have to travel far for education, and Katherine served as teacher when they couldn't find anyone else willing to move to the remote location. Through it all, Katherine and Benjamin's love remained the foundation everything else was built upon. They had their disagreements, of course. Benjamin could be stubborn and overprotective, and Katherine sometimes took on too much and refused to ask for help. But they had learned to talk through their problems, to apologize when wrong, and to never let anger fester between them. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Benjamin took Katherine back to the hillside where he had proposed. The cabin they had built was now a sprawling house surrounded by children's laughter and the bustle of ranch life. But this spot remained special, untouched except for the wildflowers Katherine had planted years before. 10 years, Benjamin said, pulling her into his arms. Best 10 years of my life. Katherine looked up at him, noticing the silver that had begun threading through his dark hair and the deepening lines around his eyes. He was 41 now, no longer the lonely mountain man who had walked into a Guthrie stable. He was a husband, father, rancher, and beloved member of a thriving community, and he was hers. Mine too, she said. Though if you had told that scared girl in the stable that in 10 years she'd be here, with 5 children and a horse training business and a family that loved her, she never would have believed it. I knew from that first moment, Benjamin said. When that fool Harold said you smelled of horses, and I looked at you, really looked at you, I knew. You smelled of honest work and care. You smelled like home, even though I didn't recognize it yet. Katherine's eyes filled with tears at the memory. That moment had been the beginning of everything. You defended me when you had no reason to. You saw worth in me when I had stopped seeing it in myself. Katherine, Benjamin cupped her face in his calloused hands. You are the strongest, most capable, most beautiful woman I've ever known. Every single day, I thank God or fate or whatever brought me to Guthrie exactly when you needed someone and I needed you. We were always meant to find each other. They kissed as the sun set behind the mountains, just like they had 1,000 times before and would 1,000 times more. When they finally pulled apart, Katherine rested her head against Benjamin's broad chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. Let's go home, she said. The children will be wondering where we are. Hand in hand, They walked back down the hillside toward the house that glowed with lamplight in the gathering dusk. Through the windows, Katherine could see their children moving about, Thomas helping Ruth with something while Elizabeth chased Emma through the main room. James sat with a book, already showing signs of being the scholarly one in the family. "We did good," Benjamin said, following her gaze. "We did very good," Katherine agreed. They entered the house to the usual chaos of family life. Emma immediately launched herself at Benjamin, chattering about a horse she wanted to train. Elizabeth showed Katherine a drawing she had made. James asked for help with a difficult word in his book. Ruth demanded a story. Thomas rolled his eyes at his siblings' noise but smiled fondly nonetheless. Later that night, after the children were finally in bed and the house was quiet, Katherine and Benjamin sat by the fireplace in the main room. Benjamin worked on repairing a piece of tack while Katherine mended one of James's shirts. It was a domestic scene, peaceful and ordinary, and yet Katherine knew how precious it was. How easily her life could have gone differently if Benjamin hadn't walked into that stable when he did. "What are you thinking about?" Benjamin asked, noticing her reflective expression. "How grateful I am," Katherine said simply, "for everything, for you, for this life we've built." Benjamin set aside his work and pulled her into his lap despite her laughing protests about being too old for such things. "Katherine Pierce, you are my heart. Everything good in my life started the day I met you. I will never stop being grateful that you took a chance on a rough mountain man who didn't have much to offer except his love." "You had everything to offer," Katherine corrected, wrapping her arms around his neck. "You had yourself, and that was more than enough." They sat together by the fire until it burned down to embers, content in each other's presence. These quiet moments were rare with 5 active children, and they treasured them. Eventually, they banked the fire and climbed the stairs to their bedroom, checking on each child along the way. Thomas slept with his arms flung wide, already showing signs of the man he would become. Elizabeth and Emma had somehow ended up in the same bed despite having separate ones, tangled together like puppies. James clutched his favorite book, even in sleep. Little Ruth had kicked off her blankets, and Katherine carefully covered her again. In their own bed, Benjamin pulled Katherine close in their customary position. "Love you," he murmured sleepily. "Love you too," Katherine whispered back. As she drifted toward sleep, Katherine thought about the journey that had brought her here. From the ashes of her old life in Guthrie, she had built something beautiful and lasting. She had found love, family, purpose, and home. All because she had been brave enough to say yes when a stranger asked her to take a chance. The stable girl who smelled of horses had become a successful businesswoman, a mother, and the beloved wife of a man who saw her true worth. And every day, she woke up grateful for the decision she had made to leave everything behind for an uncertain future with Benjamin Pierce. Years continued to flow past like the stream near their house. The children grew into adults who found their own paths. Thomas took over much of the ranch management, working alongside his aging father and uncle. Elizabeth opened her own horse training operation, building on what Katherine had taught her. Emma married a man from Denver and moved to the city, where she scandalized society with her forthright manner and became a successful businesswoman in her own right. James became a teacher, eventually taking over the Valley School full-time. Ruth, the baby of the family, proved to have a gift for healing and became the closest thing the Valley had to a doctor. Benjamin and Katherine grew older together, their hair turning silver and their bodies slowing down, but their love never dimming. They had weathered every storm together, drought years that tested the ranch, harsh winters that claimed livestock, the grief of losing friends and family members. Through it all, they held onto each other, On their 30th wedding anniversary, their children threw them a celebration that brought together the entire valley. Friends, family, neighbors, and ranch hands gathered to honor the couple who had become pillars of the community. Speeches were made, toasts were raised, and stories were told of Benjamin and Catherine's devotion to each other and their family. Katherine looked around at the gathering and marveled at the life they had created. From her hasty departure from Guthrie to this moment, surrounded by love and laughter and the fruits of 30 years of partnership, the journey had been extraordinary. She felt Benjamin's hand find hers under the table, and she squeezed it gently. "Happy?" he asked, the same question he had been asking for 30 years. "Incredibly," she answered, the same response she always gave because it was always true. As the celebration wound down and the guests departed, Katherine and Benjamin walked slowly back to their house. They moved more carefully now, mindful of aging joints and the occasional ache. But they still walked hand in hand, still drew comfort from each other's presence. That night, lying in bed together, Benjamin turned to Katherine in the darkness. "Do you remember what I said to you that first day? When Harold insulted you, you said I smelled of honest work and care," Katherine replied. She would never forget those words. "I meant it then, and I mean it now. You are the most honest, caring person I've ever known. You made me believe in goodness again after years of cynicism. You showed me that home wasn't a place but a person. You are my home, Katherine. Always have been, always will be." Katherine's eyes filled with tears, but they were happy tears. "And you are mine. From that very first moment when you defended me, I knew you were special. I knew you were someone I could trust. You've never let me down, Benjamin. Not once in 30 years." They held each other close, two souls who had found each other against all odds and built a love that had lasted a lifetime. Outside, the Colorado night was peaceful, stars glittering above the mountains. Inside their home, their legacy slept in the form of children and grandchildren scattered throughout the valley. Katherine drifted off to sleep thinking about the young woman she had been, desperate and alone in a Guthrie stable. She wished she could tell that girl what the future held, how one brave choice would change everything. But perhaps it was better not to know, to simply live the journey one day at a time and trust that love would guide the way. Benjamin held Katherine through the night, as he had every night for 30 years. Even in sleep, they remained connected, two halves of one whole. The mountain man and the stable girl had found their happily ever after, and it was more beautiful than either of them could have imagined. Dawn came gently to the valley, painting the sky in soft colors. Katherine woke in Benjamin's arms and smiled at the familiar sight of his face on the pillow beside her. 30 years, and her heart still skipped a beat when she looked at him. Some loves faded with time, but theirs had only grown deeper and richer. "Morning," Benjamin said, his voice rough with sleep. "Good morning," Katherine replied. She traced the lines of his face, memorizing features she knew as well as her own. "What shall we do today?" "Whatever we want," Benjamin said with a smile. "That's the beauty of having raised all those children. Now we get to please ourselves again." They spent the day quietly, working in the garden and visiting with Thomas and his family. That evening they sat on their porch once more, watching the sunset that never grew old. The valley spread before them, beautiful and wild, tame just enough for human habitation but still retaining its essential nature. "No regrets?" Benjamin asked, echoing a conversation from decades before. "Not a single one," Katherine said firmly. "You? Only that I didn't find you sooner." Benjamin pulled her close. "But we got 30 years together, and with luck, we'll get many more." And they did. Benjamin and Katherine lived into their 70s, blessed with good health and the continued love of their family. They watched their grandchildren grow and begin to have children of their own. The Pierce family expanded to include dozens of people, all connected through the love story that had started in a Guthrie stable so many years ago. When Benjamin finally passed away peacefully in his sleep at 78, Katherine grieved deeply, but without bitterness. They had been given 48 years together, far more than many couples could claim. She held his hand as he took his last breath, and whispered that she would find him again somehow, somewhere. Katherine lived another 3 years, spending her time with her children and grandchildren, passing on stories of their family history and the great love she had shared with Benjamin. She made sure everyone knew how their grandfather had defended her honor when they first met, how he had stood up for a stable girl nobody respected and seen the worth in her that others missed. On a warm summer evening, Katherine passed away quietly in her sleep, a smile on her weathered face. Her children found her in the morning and knew she had gone to join Benjamin at last. They buried her beside him on the hillside where he had proposed, overlooking the valley they had called home. The Pierce Ranch continued to thrive under new generations, and the story of Benjamin and Katherine became family legend. Children grew up hearing about the mountain man and the stable girl who fell in love at first sight and built a dynasty from nothing but determination and devotion. It was a story of courage, of taking risks for love, of building something lasting through hard work and mutual respect. And in the valley beneath the Colorado mountains, where the stream still ran clear and the horses still ran in the pastures, the legacy of Benjamin and Katherine Pierce lived on in every child born to their family, in every act of kindness between husband and wife, in every moment of choosing love over fear. Their story proved that sometimes, when you're brave enough to take a chance on a stranger, when you're willing to leave behind everything familiar for an uncertain future, you find exactly what you were always meant to have. You find home in another person's heart, and you build a love that echoes through generations. The stable girl who smelled of horses had found her mountain man, and together they had created something beautiful, lasting, and true. And in the end, that was all that mattered. The love they shared, the family they built, the life they created together, it was everything they needed and more than they had ever dared to dream. Their story had a perfect ending because they had lived it together. From that first meeting in Guthrie to their final days in the valley, they made their own. Benjamin and Katherine Pierce had found their happily ever after, and it was real, tangible, and complete. The end of their story was also a beginning the legacy of love and family that would continue for generations to come. All because a mountain man had looked at a stable girl and seen not someone to be pitied or dismissed, but someone worthy of love, respect, and devotion. Someone who smelled not of failure or disgrace, but of honest work and care. Someone worth everything,